Washington's army spent the winter of 1777 and 78, one of the worst winters of the period at Valley Forge, training, trying to survive, and keeping an eye on the British, which were in Philadelphia. In late May, early June, British General Sir Henry Clinton had some of his troops go down to help in Florida. On June 18, 1778, the rest of them set out to join up with the main part of the British Army in New York City, and then try to split the colonies. They were going to march their 40-mile-long wagon train across New Jersey and take ships up to New York. Washington found out and moved out to harass the British. The British set out for Sandy Hook and eventually New York from Philadelphia on June 18, 1778. However, they only got this far because Washington was following and watching the British every move to see when they were the most vulnerable. Washington sat down with his officers and discussed how to stage an attack. None of them really liked the idea. It didn't help that Washington put General Charles Lee in charge, who not only did not like the idea in the first place, but also thought he was better than Washington and would make a better commander-in-chief. On June 28th, Lee broke camp in Englishtown at 5 a.m. and around 7 a.m. pursues to attack the British camped in Monmouth Courthouse, 5 miles east along Freehold Road. The British began moving towards Sandy Hook. Lee attacked their rear guard. Lee found that he was outnumbered and retreated. This is the hedgerow, and in the morning the Americans had about 150 men of the Hunterdon County Militia. They were under the command of the Prussian Major General von Steuben. They ran into some Loyalist Rangers and the British cavalrymen who drove the Americans back. However, the colonists retook it, and it kept exchanging hands. When Washington found out about Lee's retreat, he directed Lee to hold the position while the main part of the U.S. Army got ready. Here, Lee formed a line at the hedgerow along with Major Livingston to the north, and still farther north to block the road was another unit. Lieutenant Colonel Eliza Oswald with his artillery battery was in the knoll to anchor the southern end. Meanwhile, Washington had the main part of the army along with the artillery form on Preen Hill. While they did that, the 1st Pennsylvania Brigade and 2 units of picked men were stationed along this fence to protect the Continental artillery. By 1 o'clock, Washington had 7,000 men on top of the hill and 10 to 12 cannons. The British drove Lee back over a bridge where the dip in the road is. Following them were the British 2nd Grenadiers, but the U.S. artillery fire killed the commander, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Monckton. His body lay between lines for a while. It was later buried here at Old Tennant Church, 1 mile northwest of where he fell. It came to a stalemate, during which the Second Armies exchanged artillery fire for about 2 hours. Washington, while watching this, was splattered with dirt when a cannonball struck a wet hole in the hill. General William Alexander, or Lord Stirling as he is more commonly referred to, had a strong position by using this hill. It was also protected by some streams and American infantry with artillery on Coombs Hill. During the afternoon, the British tried to get behind American lines, but were stopped by troops under the command of Marquis de Lafayette. 2 units of picked men drove the British back through the Sutphin Orchard. We now interrupt this program for the myth of Molly Pitcher. Molly Pitcher was supposedly helping carry water for the cannon when her husband working in the cannon was killed. She took his place in the cannon crew. Separate fact from fiction. Mary Hayes was much luckier than the legendary character was. On June 28, 1778, it was extraordinarily hot. It was about 96 degrees in the shade. More people died from the heat than fighting that day. William Hayes, her husband, was a gunner on the crew. His gun crew was thinned out by the heat and British fire. She was given the job of running ammunition back to the cannon from its storage 25 yards from the supply boxes in the rear. This is the spot of the cannon Mary Hayes, later called Molly Pitcher, worked during the battle. Back behind the cannon is the stream, which is where the most likely spot of the spring she might have got some water from, if she got any. This blue line shows where the stream would be if it were running. Mary Hayes was very hardy. She outlived both of her husbands and died January 22, 1832, and received a pension from Pennsylvania for her service in the Revolutionary War. Nearby the battlefield is the Molly Pitcher Inn. This inn is a very elegant place on bay. Moreover, her very own service area on the turnpike where you can find a Dick Clark grill and some gas today. Speaking of cannons, let's look how you would fire one.
This becomes a rocket which rides off with two passengers, one called right and the other called left. So it's pull it out, pop back in, dip it in the water after ramming, and then pop it out. Just pop it out so it can drain. You don't want it sobbing with water while it goes in. And at that point, it's pick.
So I push the thing in.
Pop it right out, prime it, pour a little primer before a tablespoon of powder there. Cover it up so no spark gets in. And when I think it's aimed properly, I'll say make ready, get it safe behind the wheel. And also raise it up. Fire, bring it down. Bang! All right, search. And take this and clean out the gun with it. And get ready to sponge. Hop to it. It's already wet. I just step out of there so you're ready. All right, tend to vent.
You get close.
Hop back in, get ready to load, ram, moving prime. Yep, here comes the target. Make ready, fire, bang! Search. That's it, you're ready. Sponge. Load, ram. Pick and prime. Make ready. Fire. Bang! Search, yes. Get ready to sponge. Sponge, tend to vent. Load. Ram. Ram.
That you
Pick and prime. Is it aimed properly? Get it up there. Make ready. Fire. Bang! Search. Sponge. Load. Ram. Pick and prime. Make ready. Fire. Bang! Search. As soon as you hear the bang, get ready to search. Sponge. Load. Ram. Pick and prime. But wait for me. As soon as the rammer hits the pushes the thing on the way back.
Okay.
Make ready. Fire. Bang! Search. Make ready. Fire. Bang! Now you're trained. You don't even need to. Pick and prime. Make ready. Fire. Bang! What? You just hit your hand. You should have dropped.
After the afternoon battle, British General Clinton began to withdraw, but Washington wasn't quite done for the day yet. Therefore, he sent 3 units under General Anthony Wayne to attack the rear guard of the British. They were successful against the Grenadiers at first, but then were forced to retreat and seek shelter in the parsonage buildings and an orchard. They were protected by cannon fire from the Americans on the hill where the visitor center is now. The fact that Americans were shooting from the parsonage barn didn't help either. Therefore, the British left the field for the day. There was no clear winner, and that night the British made campfires pretending to camp and be ready to fight the next day, but actually marched towards Sandy Hook and their ships in the middle of the night, leaving Washington's army alone on the battlefield, but now too far behind to catch them before they would reach their ships. Thus ended the last major battle of the Revolutionary War in the North.